Welcome, everyone. Congrats. We're almost through 2020. Thanks for joining us. This is a great event. Top 5 biggest API management trends to plan for in 2021. We hope you're as excited about this as I am. And just before we get started, though, I want to go through a couple of housekeeping items to make this experience even better for us. If you are new to On24, there are a lot of different options that are available for you. Towards the bottom, you'll see a taskbar. And on that taskbar, you can do things like look at me, change your view. You can ask questions. There is a Q&A section. And just so that you know, we will have time for some open Q&A towards the end of the presentation, but feel free to start asking questions before we get to the end. So if there's something that we run into throughout the conversation and you want to talk about it, just ask. There's a profile that's down there, and there's also some more information that you can use and take with you, read afterwards, some resources that we thought you might be interested in reading about as well. Okay? That's the easy stuff. Let's actually get into this presentation. So my name is Chris Hood. I'm a global strategist, digital strategist at Google Cloud. I've been with Google for about 3 years, and before that with Apogee. And before that, I was actually an Apogee customer. And I fell in love with the product so much that I just decided to come and work for Apogee and Google. And so very excited to be here and very excited to talk to you about the trends that we are seeing not only in 2020, but moving out into 2021, as well as the future out the next 5 or 10 years. So let's look at our agenda. So we are going to cover just a little bit, quick 2 slides or so on API management. What does that really look like? Then we're going to dive into Gartner's Hype Cycle report, specifically around API management and business ecosystems. We're going to look at what some of the biggest trends or things that we saw in 2020, which we've seen a lot. And we're going to talk a little bit about different types of API marketplaces. And then we'll end with the top 5 trends that we see that you should be ready for in 2021. And then, of course, like I said, we'll also have a little Q&A afterwards. Okay. So when we start to just simply look at a very high level, a basic infrastructure picture, we see specific solutions, right? And they're wrapped around many of the consumer experiences we're all familiar with today. But when we start to add in this API management layer on top of it, then we start to really unlock a lot of different types of experiences that are helping us get through 2020. And that's what we're going to start this foundation of. We see throughout all of the different types of market research that we've done that these connected experiences are everywhere today. We know that this year has forced many of us to, say, work from home, but we now see that up to 80% of employees would like to continue working from home. I'm sure some of you out there are thinking this, yes, I'll stay at home. And then 58% would like to make that a permanent situation. But these shifts are very hard, right? Considering most organizations are not really set up to facilitate a permanent work from home situation. A lot of the processes that we deal with are manual, and we can't really get through this process of automating those tasks that are typically done in person. And it's not just employees that are looking to keep these changes in place. As more consumers adopt digital services, there's a belief that this learned digital behaviors will continue well into 2021 and beyond. Consider something like curbside pickup or your food orders to go. all of those require APIs. And do we really think a lot of that will revert back to the way it was last year? So what is the hype cycle report? Let's start with the basic premise here. For those of you who are not familiar with the report, it is basically a snapshot in time. It starts with a timeline on the bottom, the left being current and the right being past, basically. And it also has expectations. And we start with our personal expectations, our business expectations, consumer expectations, and that goes from the bottom up. We go through all of these different cycles and phases where something new that comes to market is typically looked at as an innovation, something new, exciting. We don't have much familiarity with it, so it starts at the bottom. But as we learn more about this new innovation, our expectations quickly climb, and we get excited about it. And then a certain reality sets in. Can we actually use it? How do we use it? And then as we reach this plateau of productivity, time and expectations kind of merge together to get things that are easily understood and adopted. Let me give you an example of this, something that you might be familiar with. Let's take a look at the good old days of MP3s. When MP3s first came out as an audio source file, they were, the replacement for CDs. And it quickly became something that everybody was interested in. We started looking at things like better quality, easier to access, better storage of these files. And the expectation became extremely high in terms of all the different use cases for MP3s. But then we hit this bottom part where we started seeing piracy increase, music piracy, college campuses being sued because students on the campuses were distributing music files. Napster and other types of music services started to materialize. As we began to better understand the technology of MP3s and how we could use them and distribute them, we started getting into music devices like the iPad, right? iPods, MP3 players. And then as it became more mature, we got into things like music services such as iTunes. And then today, we see it everywhere, right? It's the norm. And that gives you a good example of how this hype cycle report works. So how does it look for APIs and digital ecosystems specifically? Well, here you go. Here is the actual hype cycle for API and business ecosystems in 2020. And this was as of August 2020. This is a report, again, that Gartner puts out for numerous technologies. And if you look closely on this, you'll see things like cloud computing on the far right, because we know now that cloud computing is a technology that most businesses have to adapt to. We also see things like API economies and public APIs, the full lifecycle API management. We see API marketplaces. And as we get up into the peak, we start seeing things like a customer engagement hub. And some of the new innovations that we're also seeing at the start, which are out 5 to 10 years, are things like business ecosystem models and AI marketplaces. So all of this we're going to kind of dive into just a little bit more. And we'll come back to this view. So the big thing really, and what we're seeing primarily from 2020, is this concept of a global API, ecosystem and different economies that support those ecosystems. This was one of the major things that happened in 2020. But let's talk a little bit, let's have a poll. Let's see where you are at in terms of your business. Feel free to answer this quick poll question. What was the single biggest challenge for your company this year? And I'm sure there's a lot. I picked a couple. Keeping your data secure, finding new customers, making changes to the business, or developing new products. There's probably others, but we'll make it easy. Okay? Go ahead. We'll come back to the results here in just a moment. If we look over the years about the evolution of APIs, we sort of seen this happen. Starting on the left, APIs really began as a way to improve access. REST was an alternative to SOAP. We introduced HTTP verbs, which became much easier to architect. We then began to move into this integration piece. And this was all about connecting software A to software B, or system A to system B. But as APIs began to mature along this hype cycle, as we began to mature, we started to see this more of an experience perspective, where we were developing digital experiences for consumers powered by APIs. But really, the businesses, and especially this year more than any, the businesses that were able to leverage APIs to be transformational were the ones that were able to adapt in the time of disruption. As the market trends changed, APIs allowed the organizations to not only transform their business, but to meet the needs and demands of consumers. So the question for you right now is, are you ready to be transformational in your approach to APIs and ecosystems? If we look back at the report, we'll see a couple of things to consider. Now, this is the early report. This is less than 2 years. And this is typically the items that are on the right. So a transformational technology within our ecosystem is cloud computing. If your organization does not have a cloud strategy today, I would argue that you're already behind the curve. This is something that is critical right now, especially as, again, we are trying to find ways to quickly transform and adopt to the changes in our consumers' behavior or requirements where we have to change. Again, we go back to the concept of working from home, or for those of you who have children, doing online education for your children at home. That is all being powered by cloud computing. The other big things that are in this less than 2 year cycle is API economies and the full API lifecycle management. Now, this is the sweet spot for Apogee, because Apogee is a full lifecycle management platform that comes with your ability to build API economies. These are, again, things that have become mature and are going to reach a plateau in less than 2 years. These are things that should already be a part of your strategy. And these are also the things that we've seen the successful enterprises this year be able to quickly adapt and leverage. Okay, here's our responses. Yeah, I would say that that makes sense. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? We have to find ways to pivot and change and be able to adapt to whatever changes are happening around us. So that's great. It's great to see. Well, maybe not so great, but I understand it. You know, a couple of years ago, this report actually came out, well, 2019 in May, by Forbes, and it stated that 86% by 2020, right now, 86% of connected experiences will overtake price and product as the key brand differentiators. And of course, 86% of these buyers would actually pay more for those experiences. Now, I can already hear what a lot of you are thinking. That number has probably surpassed that for 2020. We have lived an entire year based on our connected experiences. And that has become the single most decision point for almost everything. I want to work from home. I've got to go out and buy a webcam. I've got to work at home. I need a new microphone. I need, lights. I need whatever. I need a desk. I need these things to be connected. And I have to find better ways to connect with people within the cloud using APIs. That's the premise of 2020. Digital enterprises are thriving by being able to make these rapid changes. If we look at the value proposition here, it's about enabling enterprises to rapidly respond to the changing needs of customers by leveraging highly secure, manageable, and monetizable APIs that connect data and applications across multiple cloud environments. Now, I wrote that last year, and Forbes put that survey out last year before anything happened. This just shows you the power that APIs and these technologies have when they're used and leveraged in the right way. And these platforms, again, APIs, you have a basic supply and demand view of this. You have products and services, information, banks, grocery stores, online ordering. All of these things are both being made available through connected experiences and are in demand. Consumers are looking to align with the people and the businesses that are going to meet them with their needs. We mentioned store pickups, curbside pickups. This morning, I actually ordered something from Best Buy. I needed to go pick it up before the webinar. I drove down to Best Buy. Best Buy is now open 2 hours early just for curbside pickup. I go, I park in my little space, I put in the number, I wait, I get a little countdown when they're going to show up. I love it. It's like great because I can then time how much time is it that I can get this order and drive back home, log in for our webinar. And that's the connected experience that I'm looking for, as well as many others, all again powered by APIs. If we start to look out now to, say, the next 2 to 5 years, we start to see a few changes. Although most of this is still relatively similar, we'll start to see things like an API-based digital commerce and digital business platforms becoming more transformational. Now, what is that specifically? So a digital business platform is really all about changing your business to become more digital first and more as a platform. I realize that this is very challenging for a lot of people. The concept of, I need to change. I'll give you a good example. Domino's Pizza looks at themselves as a technology company. They do not look at themselves as a pizza company. And now why is that? They've realized that by developing the right types of technologies and connected experiences, they will be able to sell more pizza. And this mindset shift is the key to building digital business platforms. It's changing what your primary focus and products are. You can still sell the products that you have. You're just selling it in a way that consumers are looking for now. We also see in very high demand over the next 2 to 5 years, things like more SaaS-based solutions, API-centric SaaS-based solutions too, like Apogee. We see more ecosystems, we see IoT platforms, we see more marketplaces materializing. These are all going to become very popular in all industries. And these devices that are connected to different networks and different cloud providers and different systems across multiple different types of organizations and industries are not new, right? This primary example where you might have a smart home with various technologies that help make your life easier, we're seeing that starting to materialize within the enterprise. What is a smart enterprise if we compare it to a smart home? We have connected people, whether or not they're on campus or remote, in the office or not. We have connected services and information and partners all working together within these ecosystems. We're generating opportunities for the ability to rapidly change based on market trends and changes in demand. We're able to quickly scale. So if we need to add more of this or less of that, we can do that easily. And ultimately, we can be agile. So back to our poll question, if you're trying to change your business and it's very slow, how can you increase that speed, once again, to get to market faster? That's the smart enterprise. And there's a value to this. I mean, you can actually make money monetizing your APIs and data to these various connected experiences. So this is just kind of an example of a subscription for your APIs. And we're seeing this. We're seeing these models materialize over and over, and it's only going to grow in the next 2 to 5 years. I'll give you an example. There's a bank in Indonesia called Bank BRI, and they implemented Apogee, and part of their API program was to build a robust platform for these digital and connected experiences. What materialized once they set up Apogee? Well, instead of taking 6 months to onboard new partners, they now can do that in 1 hour. They have 70 partners across multiple different regions, and they've got 50 APIs that they're monetizing, more than 50 now. And the key in here, jump to the punchline, is that they were able to generate $50 million in additional revenue just from monetizing their APIs. I think that's very eye-opening when you start to think about where our future is headed. And so if we start to then look at what API programs look like for 2021, I'll obviously pose another question for you. What will be, what is the single biggest hope you have for your company next year? Return to business as usual, solve your biggest technical challenge, introduce casual Fridays at home, or generate 50 million in additional revenue with your new API products? Maybe that's an unfair poll question, but you've got it. Like to see what everybody says. So let's look now at the next 5 to 10 years and what the hype cycle is actually showing us. We see 2 primary emerging technologies. There's artificial intelligence marketplaces and customer engagement hubs. Now, I think most of you can probably figure out what an AI marketplace might be. But I think the more interesting thing is actually what is a customer engagement hub. So Gartner actually has a definition of CEH, and it's an architectural framework that ties multiple systems together to optimally engage the customer and allows for personalization, contextual customer engagements, whether that's through a human interface or interaction, an artificial agent, or maybe a sensor. And it spreads across all types of interaction channels. So really, I think if you look at this, it's sort of like if you took the omni-channel approach and tied it in with personalization and then touched a little bit of artificial intelligence in there and then tied it all together with APIs in an ecosystem to make it happen. These are the things, again, that we are seeing materialize and start to be as we look towards the future of API and business ecosystems. Let's see. Well, we do have a couple of people who want to have casual Fridays at home. That's great. I think we should all do that. Yes, clearly we can see where everybody's hopes are for next year. That's great. And you can do it. This is not Star Trek science fiction here. This is things that you can actively begin to do today to actually build additional revenue, migrate your business, transform the products and services that you have to meet the needs of your consumers. APIs are doing all of this. If we even start to look at things across different industries and ways of making this data more secure, scaling through other types of cloud services like big data, adding in analytics, then we really begin to unlock some of these things we're seeing like in a customer engagement hub. Think about APIs in, say, a parking lot. You know, we talk about curbside pickup, but there are parking lots now that are smart and they have sensors, and when you park, it knows how many spaces are available or open. And you could tie this type of technology in directly with curbside pickup, and now you've built an ecosystem where as soon as you show up, it notifies internally in the store that you're there and ready to pick up something. We're also seeing this in terms of how other things can be smart, like meters or, enforcement of vehicles. Parking, as I said, real-time parking and maps. And put this in perspective of today. Even though we may not be traveling as much, we're still engaged in these connected experiences. And they have to generate some type of ROI for your business. So that ultimately brings us then to, what do we see as being the top 5 trends for 2021? The hype cycle we've covered, and it shows you really here as a very, quick summary. Take a screenshot of this if you would like. This is a great reference so that you can begin to look at the areas of ecosystems that you should be focused on and API management. But here's what we're seeing. If we look at 2021, we see that global reach and performance is quickly becoming a key piece of the equation. How do you host and deliver high-performing public APIs across all regions? We also see advanced security being critical. So multi-layered security to protect against different types of threats. We're seeing an increased amount of threats towards different types of organizations. We also see AI-powered automation. So when we talk about working from home, but a lot of the work is still manually processed, how do you begin to automate that process? And how do you use AI to help you automate that process? We're seeing that not only just in business in general, but also in API specifically. We're also seeing a lot of privacy and compliance support. We're seeing data being standardized across a lot of different industries, and the interoperability of that data is quickly becoming easier because of API programs. And then finally, an API marketplace, generating additional revenue and streams of business products and services all through APIs. These are the 5 things that if I was to tell you to go back and start to focus on today, these are the ones that you should focus on. Okay? And with that, let's open it up for some questions. I know that there must be some great questions out there. If you've got any, feel free to chime in here. And let's see. The first one we've got here, Gartner reports indicate that they get very few queries for monetization of APIs. How many of your customers charge for the use of their APIs? So good question, and I think there's really 2 parts of that. I think that there is some terminology in here. I do think that the specific query of monetization of APIs is not being made. But if you look at the hype cycle and various other Gartner reports, there's clearly a part that, when we talk about API economies and API marketplaces and, and developer portals, the belief in there is that you're monetizing those APIs. Public APIs can very well be public and accessible by anybody for free, but we are definitely seeing that monetization is a part of the strategy of these ecosystems. Now, in terms of how many customers are directly charging, that, we see that this trend is, again, and Gartner also sees that this trend is over the course of the next 2 to 5 years. I would say that at least 10%, 15% of our customers are actually probably monetizing their APIs directly today. I would say that that is going to drastically increase over the course of the next year or 2. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Let's see. Yeah, a bunch of them are coming in here. Let's see. Do you consider an API marketplace different than a developer portal? Good question. So I think at the basis of the question, yes, I think they are different, but the same. They're different, but the same. So, a developer portal by itself is a way to put a library of your APIs together, categorize them, make them easily accessible, help to reduce redundancy, make the overall process of developing applications easier. Developer portals can be both internal or external, and there's a lot of cases of demonstrating that. So if we simply look at a developer portal as an internal way to increase productivity within your organization, then there's really no marketplace yet. I think you can then begin to attach a marketplace once you push those publicly or present them to partners or tie a value to them. And when I say tie a value to them, that doesn't necessarily mean directly monetizing them either. You can have an API marketplace exclusively for partners that are a part of some type of other internal innovation strategy or collaboration efforts. You're still getting a value out of it somewhere. So I think once you merge those together, then you start to really unlock a much broader strategy of building API economies and building platform businesses, which again, that we're seeing that trend over the course of the next couple of years as well. Good, that's a good one. We've got a lot of questions coming in. So what do you think of having SDK versus not having SDK? Is the SDK sort of unnecessary abstraction over abstraction API and just adding too much complexity and maintenance cost with the SDK? Big question there. I think the easiest thing I would say is do both. There's no problem with doing both. And we actually have a lot of developer portals out there that present both. You can present both your APIs and SDKs. In terms of your internal strategy, I think you can do whatever you want there. There's clearly needs for SDKs. There's clearly needs for APIs. I think there's a lot of organizations that focus solely on APIs, and there's a lot of organizations that, will focus on both. A good example of this would be Ticketmaster. So anytime you might have purchased a ticket recently, if you go to Ticketmaster's developer portal, which I believe is developer.ticketmaster.com, you'll see that they have both their APIs and SDKs available for access and download. So I think a strategy that has both is a good one. Let's see. What trends are you seeing to monetize APIs? Do you see any direct package sales over customized services? So the general concept around monetizing APIs, we're seeing a lot of different variations. I think this goes, again, back to the hype cycle where it's still relatively new. So I think there's a lot of kind of trial and error in terms of how people are attempting to monetize APIs. We've seen everything from flat packages, like I showed, $25 a month, and you get unlimited access to APIs. Or maybe you might fine tune that where it's for $25 a month, you only get access to certain APIs. And then for a premium package, say $99 a month, you get access to all of the APIs. So you're putting different values on the different APIs as well. We're also seeing a per transaction fee. So you might say, you're going to pay $1 for 1,000 calls, or $2 for 2,000 calls, whatever. And those types of packages are also being made available. The great thing about Apogee is that you can do all of them, and you can do a combination of them. So you could do a flat monthly fee and a per transaction fee. You can do other types of cost sharing. We actually have some people who are also doing chargebacks where they're charging other business units for use of the API platform. So all of those are viable, and there's some great opportunities in there. But it's all a lot of trial and error as well. I see one other question that I will answer real quickly. Somebody is asking if we're going to have a recording of this presentation that we can link to. Yes, we will. You will get a copy of that link that you can share with your coworkers and friends and family and neighbors and anybody else who might find this interesting. So yeah, we'll send that out, and once you get that, feel free to share it around. I think we have time for one more question, and again, we've got a lot of them coming in, so just give me a second to sort through these. So here's another one. In your first mention, we talked about delivering high performance APIs. How is high performance defined? Does it include quality? How would you define API quality? This is a wonderful question. And there's a lot to dive into it here. I could probably do an entire webinar just on API quality. So I will say that there's a couple of things to consider. I think the easiest one is to say performance by how often is it accessed and is it generating a positive response, right? There's nothing worse, and again, we've all been there, than you're trying to buy a PS5 and you can't seem to find one because everybody is sold out everywhere, and you're logging into a certain website and you keep hitting refresh and nothing's happening and you're going crazy. Not that that was me or anything, but just saying, we've all been in a situation where you're trying to access data and you can't access it because the API becomes unavailable. So I think that level of performance is something to consider. How many errors messages are you getting? How many times does your API fail? I think those are things that you can definitely start to track. I think you can also start to track things like how often is it used? There's a lot of organizations we talk to that say, we have thousands of APIs. And I say, well, that's great. It's great you have 1,000 APIs. How many of those APIs are actually used? And how often are they used? If you were to categorize or prioritize those 1,000 APIs, what's the one API that gets the most traffic? What's the 1,000th one that may not have been hit for the last 5 months? I think there's a certain level of quality and understanding. Is it being used? And I often tell customers, if it's not needed, or if it's not being used, or if your consumer doesn't want it, then why are you building it? And I think that's a great place for us to end. I will tell you that all of the other questions that are sitting here that have not been answered yet, we will reach out to you and try to get you an answer to those. But my information is right here on the screen. You can email me directly, chrishood@google.com. I'm happy to have additional conversations with you and talk a little bit more and answer any questions that we may have missed. And so if you want to do that, feel free, reach out to me. And I would like to have your feedback. And so if you wanted to quickly take a snapshot of this barcode and share some of your opinions and feedback in terms of the content today, and if you found it interesting, I would love to hear what you have to say also in that regards. And there's also an events hub. And so if you want to learn more about different types of events that we have going on or other types of conversations around different technologies, I'd invite you to check this link out also. This link will also be where we have a lot of our older content or content throughout 2020, and something might be in there that you find interesting to watch as well. And that is all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate your time and interest, and have a wonderful rest of 2020 and good luck as we move forward into 2021. Have a great day.